Hello, and welcome to another episode of Fundy Tidings. I'm your host, Jay Remer, and today it gives me great pleasure to welcome Bruce Smith onto the show. Bruce is a famous kayak guide from Deer Island, St. Andrews, and Costa Rica, and he has an amazing project that he's working on. And so, Bruce, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here, Jay.
This is a great treat for me, and this is going to be a great treat for our audience to find out about this amazing project that you're working on. So why don't you go ahead and tell us about it from soup to nuts, if you'd like.
Sure. Well, as I mentioned, I think I'll start with my history with St. Andrews, and most people would be aware that I started a small sea kayaking company down on Water Street about 27 years ago. And I opened that company with an idea of introducing people to Passamaquoddy Bay and the Bay of Fundy and the West Isles, and really in a way to help people connect with that beautiful marine ecosystem. And for a number of reasons, expanded and eventually opened the business fully on Deer Island, and still kept focusing on this idea of education and introducing people to the marine ecosystem. That business moved into different directions and doing some longer expeditions on the northern coast of Newfoundland, and many years ago starting a winter operation in the Pacific coast of Costa Rica. And I guess for me, the idea for this journey started about 3 years ago. And I had finished a paddling season, a very busy paddling season on the Bay of Fundy, middle of September, and decided to go and do what I would call a traditional vision quest, based on First Nation tradition of going to a sacred spot and spending some quiet time to just listen and feel the earth, feel the ocean, and ask questions for yourself and for the future. And over the years of paddling in this area and having the privilege to be on the water for many, many days and many years, there was a feeling, what I would call an intense vibration with all the beauty that we have out here in the Bay of Fundy, that there was this constant vibration that I felt that we needed to do something fairly quickly to protect this place before we lost it. And so throughout the vision quest, when I was asking the questions of, what can I do? What can we do to help protect this special place? The idea came back to develop awareness and understanding of this magical place. Mm-hmm. And the follow-up question to that, because it's very, very easy for me to take people out and paddle in that environment, and the connection is there, the understanding of the uniqueness and the fragility of that ecosystem is there, it's present. So it's easy to make connections that way, or to help people make connections. But how do we do that on a larger scale? So the idea started to form of doing a long distance paddle or a long distance expedition that would raise awareness of the West Isles part of the Bay of Fundy and Passamaquoddy Bay, and not just for New Brunswickers, or not just for people in the maritime provinces or Atlantic Canada, but to open that net of influence to people across Canada and around the world. Because I think, as you and I mentioned just before going on air, the idea of people coming to love a place, if they develop that love and connection, then they'll be very, very willing to jump on and help in many different ways to protect it and provide lasting protection. So nuts and bolts, as we go back to as your initial comment, next summer, 2020, starting on June 8th, which is World Oceans Day, I'm going to put a kayak in the Ottawa River near the Parliament buildings and paddle down the Ottawa River towards Montreal into the St. Lawrence, along the St. Lawrence to Quebec City, to do a little bit of a crossing over to Rivière-du-Loup on the southern shore of the St. Lawrence, and then do a portage across to the headwaters of the St. John River. Paddle the length of the St. John River from north to south, Edmundston, Fredericton, and St. John, going through the reversing falls at the right time,
fully
into the bay, and then hanging right and paddling all the way back to St. Andrews and Deer Island, and ending up on or in St. Andrews on around the 26th of September.
Wow!
So it'll be a 4-month journey. And 4 months to give me lots of opportunity to have celebrations along the way, and the major destinations along that watershed, and take time to connect with people in those communities along the way, to get people to slow down, to get people to come down to the water and make a connection to that freshwater environment, or once we do get it down and into the Bay of Fundy, that ocean environment. And a word that I've used frequently when talking about this journey, I use the word of being a celebration and bringing people together from all walks of life. First Nations, communities along the way will be very, very important parts of these celebrations, and bringing cultures together and bringing people from, as I mentioned, different walks of life to focus on environmental action, environmental education, paddling groups, environmentalists, fishing industry, that are open to thinking about more sustainable ways of doing things, and young people, who are really starting to wonder about what their future is going to look like.
So I've always, you and I have talked about this, the idea of stewardship, and the fact that we as humans, all of us, have a responsibility, if we choose to take it up, to help preserve the planet for future generations, so that we can sustain ourselves and so forth. It's interesting, the people who live by the water have a different understanding of things and how things work as far as the earth and all of that, and they're going through that particular route from Ottawa to St. Andrews will incorporate these different cultures that you've referred to, and so you'll be collecting different perspectives that each of these cultures have. And is this going to be recorded in any way?
Yeah, and you and I have talked about this before. I think the storytelling process of this journey is huge, and Hemmings House from St. John, a media company, the owner is a good friend, and we have a really good relationship and positive energy and synergies. And when I reached out to Greg regarding this project, all sorts of excitement happened. And so yes, Greg and another filmmaker who's been involved in the project already, developing a promotional film, a short one called The Window. Will Sardinsky from Aspen, Colorado, will be the actual person on the ground or on the water, and he'll be joining the journey for the full 4 months in capturing, a lot of these celebrations and the interesting characters that we'll meet along the way, and the waterways, and the wildlife that we'll be seeing, and obviously some of the challenges and obstacles, like different forms of fishing along the way. So yeah, that's going to be a very, very important part of it.
It's unusual, as I'm sitting here thinking, it's unusual to find an opportunity for different cultures to come together and express their views on a single critically important topic. And this will provide that, and hopefully it will, I guess, be part of the sort of awakening that's hopefully happening on the planet as far as our environment is concerned.
Sure. And I've already mentioned that First Nations, their support along the way will be crucial to the success of the journey. And the Passamaquoddy First Nation here in St. Andrews and around Passamaquoddy Bay, and working on this project with Hugh Akagi is a central and crucial part of the process. And we have to really give thanks to our First Nations, and in this case thinking of the Passamaquoddies, who were here long ago, long before we showed up and started to screw things up. And we're very, very responsible stewards of our environment. And
it's actually, I don't mean to interrupt, but the value that you're referring to of the First Nations being involved in this is it's interesting, because they have been here from the beginning, and they have been consistent as far as how they've managed their use of the land, and it's worked for them. And it hasn't, and as you mentioned, it hasn't been until we showed up and started screwing things up that that things started changing in a negative way. And I think that the consistency that First Nations has shown can guide us if we listen to them and follow their example. I think there's a lot that we can learn.
Yeah. And one of the things that we talk about too, that I talk about, and then First Nations people talk about, is that it's time to get away from the us and them, and really work together and to listen to each other. Because I think from non-Native perspective, one of the things that we're dealing with in terms of environmental crisis, it's because we're so disconnected from the earth or the water or Pachamama or Mother Earth or whatever term you want to call it, because we've been removed. Sure.
And we're disconnected from each other.
That's right.
Like, we're disconnected from the First Nations people, and we shouldn't be. We need them, and they need us. I mean, we need to live together. So being able to form, so what you're going to be establishing along your journey are small opportunities where people can exchange ideas, and you can collect these perspectives and form a greater, healthier whole perspective of, like, this is actually what's going on here, folks, from these collected perspectives. Because there are a number of people who descend from 17th century settlers here who have ways of life that are they're not city. It's not urbanized. It's still very rural, and the ways of life are very important. And so it's I think it will be fascinating for people, for our viewers, to actually sort of have an opportunity to step back and see what appreciation water and the environment was in the beginning.
Sure. And you've mentioned the fishing influence, and the original settlers, who came through in the 1700s, and spring forward to where we are now, and thinking about the environment. one of the other terms that I use when talking about this journey and goal setting for this journey, but we have a shared responsibility, for working together and coming together to become stewards of, in our case, Passamaquoddy Bay, the West Isles, which is very, very close to home for me. But again, going to the beginnings of this journey in Ottawa and coming down those freshwater estuaries all the way down, people have very special environments locally. And I want to celebrate those local special places as well, whether it's a freshwater estuary or, as we get down this way, a cove that's on the Bay of Fundy. That's not really, the West Isles or Passamaquoddy Bay. And I think that interaction and that sharing will go a long, long way. But for me, the ultimate goal of this journey, as I mentioned, to develop the understanding and awareness of our sacred waters, our connection to the waters, and then looking at what we have here in the West Isles and Passamaquoddy Bay, and work together to find some lasting protection for this magnificent marine environment that still a lot of people don't know and are not aware of how unique it is and how fragile it is.
Well, it's not unlike the rest of the world. Today, we as humans are made up of different groups. The largest group is that of bystanders, and you've got activists you've got good activists and you've got the bad activists, and the larger of those two groups are the ones that's going to win. So our job as responsible stewards is to try to cultivate an awareness within the bystanders so that they have a comfortable, safe path to join us and feel some fulfillment by joining us. And that's what I think the essence of this journey is about. And it's very interesting, I just thought of this, that it's terminating here in St. Andrews, because actually the bar running between St. Andrews and Minister's Island is still considered one of the richest clamming grounds in the area. And people are still down there clamming, and the Micmac and the Passamaquoddy started clamming here thousands of years ago. So it kind of makes a tidy package, and it's so appropriate to end here. I do remember you taking me out on a kayak once years ago, and it was the first time in my whole life that I was ever on a place that I saw no sign of civilization. And the feeling that came over me was a very powerful one, and it was very unexpected. And I think that feeling is there for everyone to grasp. It's just having the opportunity. So I think this journey is really important. What are some of the greatest challenges that you've had in planning this whole project?
Well, there's a number of challenges, and creating a sound revenue platform in order to support a journey like this is huge, and we're still, working on that to make sure that there's money that will be there to support the expedition, and there will be enough financial support there to support the filmmaking crew, and that's ongoing. From a personal perspective, and you and I mentioned this just before filming, again, this whole idea of when you have a dream or you have something that you feel very important about, or a call to action. And in this case, I received this message when I was doing that vision quest on Casco Island, and then saying, yeah, I'm going to do this. There's a huge sense of being vulnerable when you do make a decision to move in a direction like this and spend 1.5 years of your life working on a project and making sure all the pieces come together. But it's time that we need to do things like this. And it's interesting that today is an election day, and we'll see what happens with our government tomorrow. But it's also a feeling that I have that it's up to us to make these changes, and to lead and to work on sound practices for the environment now.
When you and I were talking about this show, I don't know, a month ago, or talking about this project actually, you referred me to a talk that Brene Brown gave, and I immediately went and listened to it, and it was on courage. And it talked about the courage that it takes to make these choices and to make the decisions, especially when there's risk involved. And you've demonstrated this courage by taking the bull by the horns and setting this whole thing in motion, which is remarkable. But I think the message that's to come out of this journey is that we all need to find that courage to be more responsible and to take an active role in our own well-being and environment.
Yeah, I mean, I would totally agree with that. And the other word that you and I talked about earlier too was this whole idea of love, and having love for the planet, having love for each other, and be able to communicate, and to interact, even if we don't agree with each other. At least we can have that conversation and move forward. But with this journey, it really is a celebration and an effort to bring that understanding and awareness together. And with water, as you mentioned earlier, there's something special about water, and some people have said that if there's magic on this planet, that's where we'll find it.
Well, I mean, granted, we are 90% water ourselves.
Yep.
And I think, it really is, we're, as humans, we're always looking to do better. And this opportunity is coming along at a time when the world is faced with a lot of divisiveness and bad energy. And we live generally in a culture of fear, most of us. And this is quite, it's a diametric opposition to that. It's reaching down inside of yourself and finding the courage that it takes to absorb perspectives and be open to different points of view. Most of us aren't at the moment. We don't have that ability because we've been thrown into this divisive society where it's very black and white, right and wrong, and that's it. And it's uncomfortable for most of us because most of us are suffering through this. So I see this project as an opportunity to alleviate a lot of that by showing by example how to do it. Does that make sense?
No, it does. And going one step further than that, it's a way to bring cultures together. And if we bring cultures together down to the water, then we just let the magic happen. I mean, you talked about your initial trip off of Deer Island and seeing that beautiful environment out there and that peaceful environment. And we all need that. And it really is time to bring people close to the water, understand how important it is to us, and that we need to take care of it, and really let that magic help us.
We just have another minute left. When are you going to be making any kind of an announcement, or how can we as viewers become involved in this project in some way?
That's a great way, to bring things to a conclusion. And this sounds like a solo journey, and it's anything but a solo journey. And I want as many people to be involved on land, on the water as possible. And to answer your question, I would say that in the next couple of weeks, a website will be finalized, which will provide some information about the journey, and so folks can find out what's going on. There'll be opportunities for people to get involved, to provide some financial support, or to get on the water and join me in different ways, or even be involved in doing some behind-the-scenes activity.
Fantastic.
So I would say stay tuned for that.
Great.
And as part of that, there will be a promotional film that I mentioned called The Window, which will really tell the story. And very thankful to the folks at Hemmings House for pulling that together.
Fantastic.
So join the journey.
Great.
Yeah.
Bruce, thank you so much for coming on the show today. This has been great fun for me, and I think this is going to be. It's a very exciting project and journey, and thank you very much.
Great. Thanks,
And
Jay.
thank you all for watching the show today. I hope you've enjoyed it, and stay tuned for another episode of Fundy Tidings.